Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu alayka ya Rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. My dear brothers and sisters, welcome to our fourth episode of HIJJAH Real Talk for our 2023 series. Tonight's episode is a little bit unique. It's a special episode as we have our youngest guests that we ever had on the Real Talk series, which is very befitting for this topic as the topic is about Muslim youth, where the topic is girls to ladies, and we're looking at the challenges that our young Muslim girls face growing up as Muslim women in a very modern Western world. So joining us tonight, two incredible girls. We have Anhaar Kareem and Zahra Sultan. I will introduce you both very properly soon, but before we do that, I just want to do a shout out to National Zakat Foundation, the organization behind Real Talk. NZF, as we all know, does some incredible work in our community, and they're currently focusing on a campaign called Falling Through the Cracks. And this explains some of the reason why we're having this episode today and looking at the Muslim youth. There's so many segments within our community that have the potential to fall through the cracks or to slip in through the gaps that are in our community where there's not enough services, whether within our own Islamic organizations or government services to help these people. It could be like the elderly, disabled people, younger, single moms. Today we're looking at the youth, and inshallah this is going to be one of those episodes where I think we can all learn from it. We have done this topic like a youth topic before, where we had coaches Jahida Al-Assad and her husband Faz Rana talking about how what they've seen as mentors for the youth in the community. But today we thought, why don't we sit down with the actual youth and talk to them about it and hear it from their perspective and their eyes. So welcome, Anhar and Zahra. How are you both?
Alhamdulillah, not too bad. How are you? Alhamdulillah, good.
Alhamdulillah. I'm going to let you both introduce yourselves today for this topic. Anhar, we'll start with you. How would you like to introduce yourself to our viewers today?
Sounds great. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Anhaar. I'm 16 years old. I'm in year 11 at high school at the moment, studying mostly humanities subjects. I am quite passionate about advocating for young Muslim women, especially in Western Sydney. In terms of hobbies, we were just talking, I don't do any sports, but I do enjoy debating and public speaking.
Debating and public speaking.
That's right.
Mashallah, that's incredible.
Thank you.
Mashallah. And Anhar, Anhar comes from an incredible family because we've actually had your grandmother on the show before. She's the granddaughter of Hajji Abla Kudus, amazing woman, mashallah. She loves her sports, actually. She actually mentioned on the show that she was a champion in rowing, mashallah, back in her days. It was incredible. Ahlan mubarak. And so it's so exciting to have you today on the show. And we have Zahra Sultan. Introduce yourself, my darling.
Assalamu alaikum. It's fun to be on the show. I'm really excited. I'm a 16-year-old. I'm also in year 11. I'm a bit opposite to Anhar. I love my sciences, not my humanities as much. I'm very passionate about some causes. I'm a Palestinian, so the Palestinian cause is, it hits very close to home. And I like my sports as well.
You like your sports?
Yeah,
okay,
I do.
We have that in common, mashallah. So as young Muslim girls, what are the biggest issues that you think our Muslim teens, in particular girls, are facing today? We had an episode on Friday where we had Brother Ali Assad, who was interviewing the boys, and it was more around, the issues that the boys face. So today I really want to focus on the female issues. And Anhar, I'll start with you. What do you think are our biggest challenge that Muslim girls in this day and age are facing?
Yeah, I think that there are obviously different challenges. Like young Muslim women obviously have similar experiences, but different ones as well. So definitely different challenges. And I'm sure Zahra might have different ones to the ones I'm saying. But I think that for young Muslim women in particular, there's unfortunately some areas in which we feel like we're not represented or where, our ability to do certain things is lacking. So I think that for Muslim women, that's issues like the fact that we don't often see hijabi or Muslim women in the spaces that we want to enter, whether that's science or sports or politics or things that a lot of young people relate to, like pop culture and media. I think there's not as much representation of hijabis or Muslim women there, and I think sometimes that can make us feel excluded or feel like our aspirations or our goals are a little bit harder to achieve. I think that's just kind of the compounded experiences we face of issues like Islamophobia, but I think that's also a very specific experience for young Muslim women, feeling left out from those spaces.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It's a really good point. Back in my generation, which is like a couple of generations ago, I think there weren't that many women didn't really aspire as much to get into those places, where now, mashallah, the younger generation, you know, these young girls have these hopes and these dreams and these ambitions, and they really want to get into it. So I think it is more of a challenge now when you do want to enter in those places, and we hear this, oh, first hijabi to enter this, first hijabi in politics, first hijabi, and like it is becoming more popular, but we're still on that. It's at that line now, that level where it's the first hijab in each field. It's like the first. Yeah. So you're saying that's one of the big challenges is that you've got to be the, what's that term? Like the one who kind of breaks that glass ceiling and the trailblazer. That's right. Yeah. Zahra, what do you think are one of the biggest challenges that a Muslim youth girls are facing?
I think nowadays it comes down to identity, where especially as young girls, because of you know, not having that representation in the media, and also the agenda that Western media you know, kind of put pressures on Muslim girls. There's almost an identity crisis that we face, where we're not really comfortable expressing our Islam, I guess, on social media. There's this almost agenda to eradicate religiosity because it doesn't fit into the, it's too conservative, and it's not, you know, modern enough, and it's not contemporary enough. And I think that really hinders some of our the ethos of our religion, where we feel almost uncomfortable expressing that. And I find around me some people are hindering you know, their Islam.
Subhanallah. Like they have to kind of water it down so it doesn't come across as you're extreme. So do you actually feel that you have to kind of hide your Islamic identity or your Islamic beliefs? Do you ever feel like even your fellow Muslim girls might think you're too extreme in your views? Has that ever come across for either of you?
I think it's not necessarily that we have to hide it, but it's not celebrated as much as it should be. You know, I know people who, when they, you know, say, you know, it's time for prayer, their friends are like, that's so extreme, but it's literally the bare minimum.
Wow. So they even consider prayer as an extreme.
Sometimes, I find that.
Wow. And these are people within our own community, as in the Muslim community?
Yeah.
Oh, subhanAllah. That's interesting. I actually didn't know that was, you know, where it's at the moment. SubhanAllah. Anhaar, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I agree with Zahra. I think sometimes that can be difficult within the Muslim community, but also outside of it. Yeah, I guess just like everybody having different stages of religiosity and sometimes judging each other for that. Whether it's, you know, not praying or praying, I think that's obviously something that everyone, you know, prayer is obviously important, something people shouldn't be judged about. But yeah, definitely understand that.
SubhanAllah. I want to get more into that a little bit later on. I really want to go deep into that particular, that whole concept of our religiosity is kind of questioned and sort of like you kind of have to water it down. Before we go into that, I want to talk about something that's, it's another big topic, and that is, because you did mention it, the role that social media and technology plays. Because in your generation, you know, the digital world is, you were born into it. So back in my generation, I'm almost 40 now, so I feel like there's this massive gap. Back in my generation, it was like, we didn't have social media. Internet in my childhood wasn't a thing. So a lot of the challenges that you guys are facing now literally did not exist for us. And that's why this is a question that I really want to talk about, because I assume that a lot of our viewers are in my age group. So they really need to hear this from the children, from the youth, from your eyes. And also I'm hoping there's, you know, people your age group that are also listening in, so they can also, you know, get your perspective as well. So let's talk about the technology and social media. As you guys are growing up in this digital world, and social media is, like I said, it didn't exist back in our days. It came later on, and now social media, everyone has access to you. Like if you're on social media, anyone can have, whether it's WhatsApp or Instagram or Facebook, anyone has access to you, where you don't have that, I guess, that privacy as much as you used. Like we were untouchable or uncontactable, basically. And you guys, you know, you're kind of there for everyone. Let's talk about how this impacts you as a Muslim youth, and what do you see the role that social media plays in your life? Can you completely keep it away, or does it play a big role in your life? Let's start with that.
Yeah.
Okay. You start, and then
Zahra. That's the Okay. I'm not, I'll be honest, I'm not that active on social media. I mean, I have an account, but I don't use it much. That's not, I wouldn't say like.
What about your age group at school and stuff? Do you see a lot of girls are on social media?
No. It's definitely something that's prominent. And definitely.
So you're like the exception to what the
majority of people probably do on social media. And I don't necessarily think it's always bad. Like, I think there are a lot of benefits to social media.
Yeah.
Whether it's, you know, just fun, like being able to connect with people. But I think also just like Islamically, it can be really good for a lot of information.
Yeah.
It can be really nice in terms of like learning new things, or it's hadiths, or like seeing other young Muslim women. It's, I think, very beneficial in that. But obviously there are harms to social media as well.
Yep.
I think just the way that platforms are often designed, the way that algorithms work, just often means that you get exposed to content which is graphic, or often, you know, harmful. I think
there's like no escaping it. Like, it's kind of forced onto you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that looks like, you know, things like body image issues that often arise from social media.
And have you seen that a lot amongst your friends or your circle and your age group?
Yeah, I think that,
so
that
body
naturally
image issues
happens.
is a big thing.
Body image issues, I would say,
Yeah.
like among my like self, my family, my friends, probably a pretty prominent issue. I think social media exacerbates that. But I think, yeah, it just often tends to show you content that can be harmful for your self-image, or can be harmful for your ideas and your views. I think there's often, like, whether it be extremist content out there or content that makes people feel uncomfortable, and sometimes that can be hard to avoid.
Yeah. Zahra, what about you? What role does social media play in your life?
I think it doesn't matter what environment you're in the real world. Social media is always going to have that prevalence in your life. And, you know, I go to an Islamic school, and you'd expect that everyone shares, you know, very grounded values and beliefs. But because of social media, we mentioned this before, it dilutes the values that we carry, especially because of the agenda that it plays. And I mentioned this before, everything now is so contemporary and modern, and, you know, the idea of religion is so conservative. And I find oftentimes people are trying to break free of that on social media. And they say things like, you know, I left my family because they were pushing, you know, religion on me, which I get, but it's very dangerous when you don't have people that you can speak to, or people who ground you in your religion, because it definitely pushes that on you, and I find that very dangerous.
Yeah, subhanAllah. Wow, that's so true. The whole concept of, you know how you mentioned, it doesn't matter how in your real world how good that might be and how religious or good your environment might be. When you're on social media, you're exposed to so much that, you know, even your parents don't have a control over what you're exposed to. Like, everything is there. And then you had mentioned, Anhar, that there's so many differences. You're exposed to differences of opinion, even within like the Islamic, you know, quote unquote, like the Islamic pages and stuff. You know, there's so many, I guess this is a whole nother topic, and we can talk about this as well. And that's, you know, specifically for Muslim youth girls, our young Muslim girls, the concept of hijab, I feel like, is being completely eradicated or warped from social media. So again, going back in my generation, okay, so I grew up at a time where like no one really wore hijab. I was in every school that I've been to, and I've been to many, like 11 different schools all over the world I've been to. Yeah. In every school, I was the only one that wore hijab. Only in high school, there was like 2 other girls that wore it. So we were always the ones that were, you kind of had to learn your Islamic identity. You had to make the effort to put hijab on, and you stood out, and it became your identity. I was the Muslim girl. That was how everyone knew me, because I wore hijab. Nowadays, I feel like, so we're talking about the hijab concept right now, and we're tying this into social media as well. To wear hijab nowadays is not, especially in the Sunni community that we're in, especially if you're living in Bankstown, these kind of areas, you don't stand out. It's not, you can still wear hijab and not have that be the center of your identity. And I feel like social media for your age group has really kind of confused the young, and tell me if you agree with this or not, confused our young girls with what the purpose is and what the concept of hijab is. So give me your views on that. And do you feel like that we are missing the whole purpose and concept? It's being kind of slipped away and messed with because of what's out there on social media with all our hijabi influencers and different, you know, hijabi fashionistas and stuff, where it's become more of a fashion icon rather than what the purpose of it, that we're wearing it for the sake of Allah. Give me your views. Zahra, I'll start with you on this one.
Anhar mentioned this before, social media, it has its pros and its cons, and with the whole idea of having hijabi influencers, it definitely has its positives, because you're seeing people who they know that it's not, you know, I know people who don't want to wear the hijab because there aren't many fashion accommodation and things like that, but hijabi influencers are kind of assisting in that. They show you that it's not a restricted thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do agree that we've kind of lost the meaning of it. It's not supposed to be there for fashion. That can be like, you know, something that we like about it, but we need to see the real meaning in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think
so
I
there's
agree
two
with that.
sides to
Yeah,
see
there's
with
two
that. So in
sides.
one side, it's kind of good because it might actually get more girls to feel comfortable wearing it. But on the other side, it's like, okay, well, have they lost the actual meaning and reason for why they're wearing it? What about you, Anhaar? What are your views on that?
Yeah, I think I understand that, and I definitely agree with Zahra. I think that hijab influences and kind of the presence of hijab as something that's fashionable on social media. I think that overall, I think it's been important in making both girls that already wear hijab or girls that are thinking about wearing the hijab feel a lot more, I guess, included, feel like they can wear the hijab without it being something that's like ugly or, you know, like makes them excluded. I think it can encourage people to wear the hijab and feel good about it. I understand that, but I think at the same time also hijab is different for everyone. Like, I think that obviously the reason why we wear the hijab is for Allah, and that's the central reason, but many people have different things that resonate with them with the hijab. So whether it's, you know, a way of like empowering them, whether it's a way of you know, protecting themselves, like everybody has different reasoning for wearing the hijab as well. Obviously Allah is the center of why we wear the hijab, but I think that making it something that's fashionable, making it something that people find empowering and like important to them is also good.
Okay, interesting. Let's talk about the identity crisis. And this kind of I think all these questions sort of tie into each other. We might like overlap in a lot of our discussions here. So the identity crisis in this day and age, you know, growing up as young Muslim girls in a very modern and a very Western society. And as I mentioned before, your challenges are vastly different to the challenges that I grew up in. We didn't have as much fitna out there as you have now. And you have more... Fitna is more easily accessible now. I think fitna has always been around, but it's just more easily accessible and it's more kind of in your face nowadays. How do you struggle to protect yourself from it? And how do you keep your identity, your Islamic identity, and protect yourself from all of that when it's just constantly in your face? I'll start with you, Zahra, and then Anhaar will go to you.
Well, the identity crisis is massive with the prevalence of social media in our lives right now.
Yeah,
I think
that's the third time you've actually mentioned social media, so it's a huge issue.
Huge.
Yeah, subhanAllah.
And one of the, like, I know from friends and people around me, one of the biggest issues is that people are taking on contemporary views that don't align with Islam. And I think a solution to this problem is involving yourself in the real world. You know, obviously online you have access to good resources, things like this, you know, you can watch. But you need to find role models in the real world who can assist you with this, and people who have wisdom and hikmah in you know, fields like this, so you can ask them for advice and stay grounded. Like I attend halaqat fortnightly to keep you grounded, keep you understanding about what's happening in the real world. So things like that are very important when it comes to identity on social media.
Yeah, and being in that right crowd as well. Do you 100%. Feel like there's enough out there in our community for our youth?
Oh, there's plenty.
There's plenty. Yeah,
but obviously there could be more, but I think it's about, you know, stepping forward and actually getting involved. And I think there's two ends of the spectrum to this. It's either people don't care, or I see a lot around me going to a private school, people are stuck in a textbook and they don't they don't want to involve themselves outside of you know, studies and things like that. But I think it's so important to expand yourself and get involved, especially in the Islamic field.
Wow, very well said, very well said. What about you, Anhaar? Let's the same question. Yeah. Do we have an Islamic identity crisis amongst the youth, first of all?
Well, I think that definitely, like, accessibility to Islamic information, being able to know what you know, like, Islam says about certain issues, being able to constantly feel connected is something that I think is really important. I agree with Zahra. I think there's a lot out there and a lot of opportunities to do things, like whether it's watching a video or attending halaqah. I don't go as regularly as Zahra, but I do think, you know, I go weekly, and I think that having that community of other young Muslim women being able to learn about Islam is really important. I think that, yeah, definitely there can be a bit more done to make it more youth-tailored, I think. Like, I think there's a lot of really good information out there. But I just think, like, different things work for different people. Some people prefer lectures, some people prefer, like, discussion-based things. Yeah, there's just so many different ways that people learn about religion. I think for young people, things like discussions and, like, community gatherings and things like halaqas can be really helpful, and I think that's really important. Yeah,
very well said too. Do you think that, have you seen, like, amongst your circles or amongst your age group, that a lot of young Muslim girls struggle with a sense of belonging?
I think it's different for everyone. Everyone has a different experience with this. I said before, I go to an Islamic school, so I don't feel excluded or, you know, different. Everyone's wearing
because you're in that environment all the time.
But people who go to a public school or, you know, even Catholic schools, Muslim who attend there, they may feel different. But again, when we step out into the real world, I'm not too sure yet because we haven't, you know.
I was actually going to ask, like, do you have do you have non-Muslim friends?
Yeah, I do.
You do. So do you have a lot of exposure to non-Muslims? That's another question. Yeah.
Not as much as I would say you probably have more exposure than I do.
Maybe. I mean, I don't go to an Islamic school.
Oh, so you don't go to an Islamic school? Okay,
don't.
so this is really interesting. I'm glad that we've got two separate. Okay, so Anhar, you don't go to an Islamic school, so you're probably the right person to ask this question.
Okay.
Do you feel like? Do you ever feel like that there's a sense of belonging missing being, you know, the Muslim girl in a non-Muslim environment?
Yeah, I agree with Zahra. It's different for everyone.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes there is a lacking of sense of belonging just in terms of, you know, practices and what's considered acceptable is different. Not just for Muslims and non-Muslims, but even across Muslims, across other religions and other families as well. Like some parents have just, you know, different expectations for their children to others. I think sometimes that can be different among like friend groups and among social circles. But I think that that's probably a natural thing growing up in the 21st century, growing up in Australia. Like there are just so many different religions and values. And I think that whether you get exposed to that in high school, whether you get exposed to that in uni or in work, that's inevitable, I think.
Yeah. Do you have a lot of non-Muslim friends?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do you feel as the Muslim in those non-Muslim environments? Do you feel like you have to hold on to your Islamic identity a lot so it doesn't get, you know, tampered with? Do you feel accepted? You know, just run me down through how you're feeling as a young girl in this environment.
Yeah, I feel like for me it's okay. I have some Muslim friends, some aren't Muslim, but all like totally understanding and accepting. I think my school is pretty progressive in terms of like, I guess, who goes there, kind of like what the ideas are, but I think it's very much for everybody having their own, I guess, religion and beliefs, and that's something that I've been okay with. Like I've had a good experience with friends and with religion personally, but I know that maybe it can be difficult or different for other people as well.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Well, thanks for sharing that. Let's go back down to like the challenges that we were talking about, and I want to talk about the role that our parents or your parents are playing in this. So as young Muslim girls who see and face all these different challenges that we've talked about, and you're, you know, facing these at the forefront, what do you think is the biggest change that parents need to make, parents of our teenage girls, to have these open conversations? What kind of conversations do they need to have? How do they need to make their teenage girls feel comfortable? And would you even, how realistic is it that you would go and have, you know, like a very personal, maybe embarrassing or very, you know, like those kind of conversations with your parents that, you know, either you might get in trouble or it might be embarrassing. You know, just talk to me about that. What kind of relationship should parents have with their teenage girls? Zahra, we'll go with you. All right. Your mom's probably watching.
Well, I was actually talking to her about this. She was telling me back in her times, those open conversations were not as
they did frequent, not happen at all.
And things that should be considered okay were considered taboo conversations. You know, having feelings for the opposite gender, like, it's okay as long as you don't act upon it.
It was always centered around shame as well. Like 100%. You're not allowed to even talk about it. Everything's taboo, especially when you come from a very conservative cultural upbringing as well. So your mom's right.
But I think it's so important to have that that comfort, you know, being able, it doesn't have to be both parents. You know, I'm more comfortable speaking to my mom about this than my dad, and everyone's different. But I think having comfort in someone like your parents is so important, because if it's not with your parents, you're going to seek advice from the wrong person outside of that comfortable circle, and they know, you know, you share in your religious beliefs, you share in those things. So it's so important to be able to have those conversations with your parents openly.
How realistic is it though? Do you, and just be honest and open here, would you go to your mom and have these kind of conversations?
Personally, I would, but I know people who wouldn't. My mom's been very adamant on the fact that we should be able to talk to her, and if anything, either if we've made a mistake or if we have feelings or if we need to talk about anything, that she should be one of the first people that we go to. And it's so important that we have that. But if it's not the case, like, I can understand why people would feel that they can't speak to their parents as openly.
What do you see amongst the girls around you? Do they have that relationship with their parents? Do their parents allow them to even have those kind of conversations with them? What's happening? what's happening in your age group?
I think in my age group, a lot of people, they don't even know if their parents would allow them because they're too like ashamed to have these conversations.
So it's still there. That's still,
Not necessarily shame, but more embarrassment, you know, like, oh, I don't want to tell my parents this. That's kind of embarrassing. But I guess in my age group, it's not as common, but I can see it happening. It's progressing a lot. People are having these conversations more openly.
That's good, alhamdulillah. Anhaar, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's also very important. I think that a lot of things are unfortunately pretty taboo. I think sometimes just generally, but also especially, I don't think they're taboo in Islam, but I think often kind of culturally we've made them stigmatized.
We make it taboo,
things like mental health, you know, a bunch of other things. I think sometimes you feel a bit uncomfortable speaking to, especially other generations, so your parents about. For me, I have a pretty close relationship with my mum. I usually feel comfortable talking to her about things, but yeah, it definitely is difficult on certain issues, and I think that we definitely need to destigmatize a lot of those things. Because whether it's speaking to, you know, your parents, like Zahra said, some people feel more comfortable speaking to their mum. Maybe it's different for other people as well. Or even like teachers at schools or counselors. I think sometimes it can be really difficult to approach people. I think that needs to change.
Yeah. What do you think is the main reason why the young Muslim girls would hesitate talking to their parents about it? Is it this feeling of judgment or shame, or they're going to get in trouble? Like, what like, in your age group, what's happening nowadays? Do you guys get grounded like we used to? Like, what is it? Do you get your allowance taken away? Like, what's the reality like? Maybe not for yourselves, but for what you see around you.
Well, I think sometimes because of the way that those issues are viewed socially, it's just a bit embarrassing, I guess, talking about certain things. Also, I mean, for me, like, I don't usually get punished for being open with my parents, but maybe for other people, if they've brought up a mistake they made or something they're unsure about, and their parents, you know, like, you know, not very happy about that, I think, I don't know, I don't get grounded. That's not something that happens to me, but like,
I think that was back in our days. It's like, go to your
like phone restrictions usually, or like, you know, well, not grounded, but like you know, the next time you ask to go out with your friends, maybe it's not, you know, things like that.
Interesting. What do you think, what advice would you give to parents of youth then? What do you think they can do better to make their youth not keep things from them?
That's a hard one, because I couldn't imagine being a parent in this climate.
Hard, man. It's hard.
Yeah, like, it's intense. But I think you have to kind of step down a little bit and relate to your children, because especially in the climate that we live nowadays, you need to have these conversations. Otherwise, you have the kid going to someone who they shouldn't. And especially now, I see a lot of people who ask for advice on social media. You're going to have complete strangers answering your questions, and you know, you're going to have the wrong people giving you the wrong advice. So if you're open with your kid and, you know, you've kind of just chilled a little bit, I think that should definitely progress those open conversations that need to be had.
I think that's really important what you said. You kind of just chilled a little bit. I think, you know, for our generation, when we knew we did something or we were going to get in trouble or something, our parents did not chill a little bit. And that's why it's our instant reaction. And just as parents, because you do, like, our parents loved us so much. So your natural reaction when you see you want to protect your child is to not chill and just like get them in trouble. Just like you have this like impulsive reaction. So I think that's really good advice, is that we need to kind of just, okay, take a step back, not try and deal with them the same way that we were dealt with, and just think, okay, how can we actually try to understand? And what advice would you give to parents of youth when they want to come up? And, you know, sometimes these conversations are as a parent, it can be very uncomfortable as well, hearing it. And it's like, because you don't want, especially I think parents of girls, you just want to protect them. Girls have a very, very special place in a parent's heart, and you feel so like you just want to protect them. You don't want anything to ever happen to them. So when your girl comes up to you and then says, you know, things that makes you feel like, you know, uncomfortable or even angry because you don't want her to go through that, how can you, you know, what advice would you give to parents to like chill?
I like Zahra, I definitely empathize with them, and I think I agree with what you're saying. I think like my parents brought them up in a way that was probably wouldn't work today. So like, you know, their experience with their parents, if they were a lot stricter or a lot harsher, they often kind of transfer that. Or, you know, they might not have the exact same understanding of the kind of struggles that we go through today that maybe their generation didn't go through. So I think that that adjustment is probably pretty tricky to make, I can imagine. But yeah, I think just trying to be as open as possible with kids, making sure that like they feel like they can come to you with any questions that they have and that you can answer them without making them feel judged or without making them feel embarrassed. Obviously, I'm sure that's easier said than done, and I would have no idea what it's like, but I think that's really important to just have that open relationship with kids.
Well, it's actually good to hear it from, you know, your generation. You know, like, this is what we want. What advice would you then give to your generation, to girls of your age, when they are going through something that is, you know, whether it's a girl that's, you know, contemplating taking hijab off, or she's, you know, got a really deep crush on someone, or, you know, is about to do something that is questionable in our deen. What advice would you give to help her?
I mentioned this before, but it's really important to find appropriate role models within your community, and I think even expanding beyond your parents. Obviously, have them keep them in the loop about who you're planning to engage with when it comes to having a role model. But definitely face-to-face interactions, having a good role model like that is very important to keep you grounded, and so that you can ask questions when you need to. Very important.
And where do you find these good role models?
I attend halaqat with they're not, and the thing is about these halaqat, they're not necessarily people who are much older than me. They're uni girls who went through the same thing, and they're not necessarily, you know, completely well versed in their Islam, but they have that understanding of what it's like to live in this climate, and they can pass on, you know, good words of wisdom. So I think that's important as well.
That's beautiful. That's such an important point, because you might not always, you know, it's so good that we have people amongst us in our community that are, you know, very knowledgeable. Alhamdulillah, we've got like sheikhs in our community, and really sometimes it's not always as easy to have access to them, but also sometimes I think for your age group as well, you need someone that you can relate to, and someone who 100%. Understands what you've gone through, so there's not that massive age gap either. So I think it's really good that you mentioned the halaqat. Like, that's that kind of that gathering in the environment where you go, where you know that there's people there that understand and can keep you grounded. Anhaar, what about you?
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with Zahra. I think doing things like halaqah, having, you know, Muslim role models that you can look up to, is obviously really important. I think also that is important to being able to have like a connection with Allah, I think is really important, and just kind of understanding that, like, Allah is very merciful, right? I think that a lot of the time, like, when you feel like maybe you're doing the wrong thing or whatever, it's very easy to kind of fall into the trap of like, you've got no hope, that kind of idea. So I think just knowing that, like, you know, we're young, and you know, there's going to be challenges, but that like,
so I think do you see that a lot? Like, do girls make a mistake and then think, oh, like, I'm done for, I've got no hope, I've done something that's really wrong, so there's no point doing something right because I'm already I've gone off path. Do you see that a lot happening in your age group?
I've heard this Islamically, like, as in that one of like shaitan's like biggest tricks is like, you know, oh, you haven't prayed this prayer, you might as well just like not pray today. Or, you know, you didn't fast for this day in Ramadan, you might as well just give up, right? I think that can often be harmful.
Yes, subhanAllah. So it's very important for everyone, especially our youth, to understand that and also you're still so young, like, you're going to make mistakes, you know, that's just natural part of growing up, and you know, Allah is going to be merciful, and Allah is so merciful. There's always so much that you can do to rectify that. Speaking of which, now this topic, I want to talk about your generations, the challenges, and and I really would like for you to just be really, really open in answering this. Don't hold back. What are we seeing the interaction? What's going to happen? I'm asking the question about the interactions between the opposite gender. So in your age group, back in our age group, like, we didn't have social media, so really, apart from family, friends, we had no interaction. We were always protected. You know, our parents could physically protect us from having to deal with boy teenagers. In your age group, this is different, and I would assume that a lot of people in your age, might not be your friends, or people in your circles that you're around, are constantly interacting with the opposite gender. Tell me about that. Is this something, are you seeing a lot of like boyfriends and girlfriends in our community at your age? How are parents getting involved? Are parents allowing it? Are these kids having these conversations? And how would you advise people protect themselves? And how you're nodding a lot, so I'll let you go first.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
I think that I can imagine it's probably a bit more prominent than it would have been at other times, you know, things like, I don't know, Snapchat and Instagram. I'm not too much across social media, but I know that it's
slip into our DMs.
It's very easy. Now that's something that's possible. Yeah, definitely. I think some of that comes from the problem in that I just think there's a lot of like not enough interaction between young Muslim girls and guys, and I think like is it not in like a not good way, but is in like, for instance, not being able to see other people, I think can be harmful, because then the moment that you do things like go into uni, or the moment, I know that like in a lot of Islamic schools you kind of start getting mixed classes in year 11 and everyone goes a little bit
so it's like, what if you're, so basically you're saying because there's so much restrictions that when you finally have the opportunity to meet boys or what do you call them these days, guys, do like there's that kind of excitement, and there's this it's harder to, like, the desire increases more.
I don't know. I mean, obviously it's not the same for everyone, but just like for some people, I mean, like not interacting with a lot of other people can mean, I guess, you're a bit sheltered, and then when you do get that opportunity, it changes. I think also from what I've seen, it can be, I'm not too sure what the experiences of young Muslim guys are exactly, but it can be a little bit harmful being like completely excluded from having, like, you know, knowing or seeing other like women your age, because I know that often kind of like some bad ideas like form from that. I think you see a lot of guys that have some odd ideas, sometimes a bit sexist.
Talk to me about that. Like, what do you mean? Give me an example.
Well, I mean, obviously not to generalize or anything, but
that's
just
okay.
Like,
you're being open. No, this is what I want. This is real talk.
Being open. But I think sometimes you see some kind of degrading ideas about women, because if you don't do things like, you know, attend a class with them or even have like family that's around your age, I feel like there's a lot less empathy for them or understanding of them.
Interesting. Kind of like you lose that human factor.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously that's not to say that like things like, you know, having different girls and boys classes in Islamic schools isn't good, but I just think that there definitely needs to be a lot more interaction, just seeing each other as like,
so you know how to interact,
right? Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay, Zahra, do you feel the same way as well?
Yeah. I was going to mention the exact same thing. And we were talking about this before. We both do legal studies, and we were talking about the new stuff we're learning now, which is about women and the law. And Anhaar asked me, do you have mixed classes? And I said no, but it would be really interesting to see the debates that would happen, because she's right, you know, at an Islamic school, I've had segregated classes since year 7. And now that we're in year 11 and 12, when we're having mixed classes, you find that girls and boys don't know how to interact. And it's really weird, but we're sitting in class and it's almost as if the other group doesn't exist at all. So we're communicating through the teacher. It's really weird.
Yeah. But, this is interesting. I honestly am shocked at this response, because I wasn't expecting this. I think because for me growing up, we didn't have Islamic schools, so everything was mixed and co-ed. So it's interesting now that you're saying that in an Islamic school, that might actually make it more difficult to protect yourself. Because,
and the thing is, like, even if parents or schools or whatever decide to shelter the kid, it's inevitable that they're gonna have interactions at some point later on in uni or in work. So you need to educate them, like, through real interactions, how to speak respectfully and interact with the opposite gender.
And I think being respectful is a big thing. Like, from what I've seen, like, sometimes, you know, if you don't have that kind of interaction, I know, like, there's a lot of like young Muslim boys that, you know, like, obsessed with like Andrew Tate, or like, you know, have some odd opinions. Not obviously to say that young Muslim women are immune from things, but I think sometimes that forms because of lots of factors, things like social media as well. But I think that, you know, that kind of isolation can be a bit harmful in that respect as well.
Wow. I'm very, I really appreciate you, you know, this is, for me, it's like a different shift of perspective, because I always just assume, I don't know, I think we're just very old school parents, then we just assume, okay, keep them away to protect themselves. But you're right, because eventually you are going to have to grow up, and as an adult, you have to deal with the opposite gender all the time. Like, especially if you're working, it's something that just, it's part and parcel of your life. You have to. So I think, it's very important that we teach our young girls and our young boys, as you mentioned, and teach them to actually humanize their fellow sisters in Islam, not just, you know, keep them as this, like, oh, they're just the sisters, but there's a human element to that as well, and to deal with them with respect. I think that's very, very important. Okay, thanks for that. That was like, I was thinking, I wonder how they're going to answer that question, but that was really good. It's actually very eye-opening for me, so jazakallah khairan for that. What do you guys think our community needs to do more of to help bring the best out of our Muslim girls, you know, help them get strong in their identity, teach them how to interact with non-Muslims, teach them how to interact in the right way with the brothers in Islam, teach them how to respect their parents, you know, all of this, you know, building that strong Muslim girl. And when I say strong, I don't mean just like, you know, she's empowered. I mean like strong in her deen. She's got her head screwed on right. She knows what to, like, how to stand tall, be confident, and live the way that we as Muslim women should live. What do you think our community can offer more to make this happen?
You want to start?
It's a big question.
Sure.
I don't even know the answer. So.
I think we keep coming back to this, but I think having like halakha,
so halakha is a really important thing. You're saying
very important, I think. But also just like programs for young Muslim women. I know that, alhamdulillah, I think there are a lot of them, and there are more. There's like I Run My Grandma's organization. There's the UMA as well. There's heaps of amazing organizations that do youth specific, but also like specific to Muslim women as well, young Muslim women as well, which I think is really good.
What do you want them to offer more?
Offer more of? I think I would say that. I think that's a good question. I think like offering more discussion-based learning is something that I think helps me. Things that I guess are relatable to me. So I think sometimes when you get, you know, really amazing and very like learned and knowledgeable sheikhs who maybe are a little bit older, you know, who don't have the same experiences as women, as young Muslim women today, that can sometimes, often you get really good knowledge, but maybe it's not as applicable to your life. I think you were saying you have like uni students as some of your teachers. That can be really helpful, having other young Muslim women around, you know, kind of being able to relate to them and being able to implement that into your life, I think is helpful.
Yeah, that's a wonderful answer, because that kind of just hits the nail on the head. We actually need more young Muslim female representatives in our community.
For sure.
Going out and doing things, and not have all of our talks and lectures run by the elder, more learned people, but actually having people like you come on these shows like this and, you know, being these gatherings. I think that's really important. Thanks, Anhar. What about you, Zahra? What do you what would you recommend? What do you want to see more of in our, just reiterate the question, what do you want to see more of in our community? What do you think we need to offer more of to help build strong Muslim women who have a strong sense of their Islamic identity?
I think, alhamdulillah, we made a lot of progress as a community. The fact that we're having gatherings like these and we're seeing a lot of them, like Anhar mentioned. I think what I want to see more of is fostering, because you mentioned that it's important, well, we all mentioned it's important to have these younger people acting as role models for the people who are even younger than them. So fostering leaders within the community, especially within women, is so important.
Wow, I love
there
that.
There are so many organizations that do this, and I think we should increase that and expanding beyond just the Islamic side of things, but into leadership circles, into contemporary issues that concern us, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's so important, so important. I want to end off with the last question. This just popped into my head now. Do you ever, as Muslim girls, feel isolated or silenced by men in our community in Islamic gatherings? Do you ever feel like that there's not enough happening where Muslim women have the ability to have a voice? Do you feel like for your generation, it's mainly the brothers that are at the forefront of dawah? Or do you feel like, no, it's all very opening and welcoming for Muslim girls as well?
I said this before, we've made a lot of progress, and we're seeing so many more women step up to the role of education when it comes to Islam in the community. I don't necessarily feel that way now. I think it may change as, you know, we grow up and, you know, we're more active within the community. But for now, I think we've made a lot of progress, and I'm optimistic.
Alhamdulillah, that's beautiful. What about you, Anhar?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely optimistic as well, and I think, like Zahra said, we've definitely made a lot of change. I think there are, unfortunately, though, some, I think, structural things that are problems sometimes. So whether it's like, you know, female prayer rooms are often like, you know, half the size or very small, you know, very cramped. Often just get taken up when it's things like Delaware, like issues like that. Issues, I think some people still have some different opinions on like how women are able to be present in the community, whether it's having like women shuyukh or like, you know, women being able to recite Quran. I think definitely there are some gaps in terms of whether or not people think those things are acceptable. So yeah, I think sometimes those are present, but I think like Zahra said, they're being challenged, and there are definitely some really strong like Muslim women role models within like Islamic circles, which I think is amazing.
Alhamdulillah. Let's end it off with the last question. What's your vision for the Muslim girls of your generation? What do you hope for them? What do you hope to see for yourself and for them in the future in living in this modern Western Australian world?
I think I would love to see more people take pride in their religion, because I wouldn't necessarily think people are hindering their religion, but they're not proud to take steps to practice it.
Yeah.
Even I know people who their entire friend groups are Muslim, but they don't take active steps to practice it necessarily. Like, they're out in public, they've gone out together, but they don't want to sit and pray. It's too embarrassing for someone to. So I think soon enough people will be more open about this, but I hope to see more people around me just be more comfortable with their religion and not I don't know, I don't want to say hate it, but not I can't think of the word.
Embarrassed about it. Yeah. That was a beautiful answer, Zahra. You basically said you want this generation to grow up being very proud of their Islamic identity. Like, that's what I gathered from what you said.
And it's going to be more important as well as we continue to, like, nowadays our religiosity is always being challenged, so it's going to be more and more important to be proud of our identity. So I think seeing that will be
very important now, because we are living in a time where they are trying to strip everyone of religion, 100%. And religion holds no value to society. Like, they want a godless society. That's what it is. So that's why the challenges that you're facing they're very intense. What about you, Anhar? How would you like to end off this episode? The question is, what's your vision? What would you like to see for young Muslim girls of your generation?
Yeah, I think same as Zahra, definitely to feel like they are like grounded in religion and grounded in communities that really support them. So having, parents that they can go back to, having friends, having other young Muslims that they feel like they can connect with, I think is really important, and having that strong like faith in Islam. I think also just, in future being able to balance, I guess, the parts of their lives. I think obviously everyone might have different aspirations in the future, but being able to, work on themselves spiritually, but also be able to pursue whether they want to pursue a career or pursue a family, or, be able to be a role model for other young Muslim women. I think just having that opportunity in future, I think would be really amazing.
That's amazing. MashaAllah. I really, really enjoyed this discussion with you both. I feel like it was very eye-opening for me. I have to be honest with you. I think I realized I am, number one, quite old, and number two, quite sheltered, and number three, quite old school as well. And it's been very eye-opening to actually hear your responses, which was very different to what I was thinking. So it's that shift in perspective that I needed. I'm a mom of boys, so I don't have girls. And to hear it from teen girls, it's like, wow, okay, so this is what the reality is like, and this is what you guys want from us and what you need from the community. So I really appreciate that. Jazakallah khairan. And you both, mashallah, I see you both as amazing role models for the community, and I really hope that we have more youth like you in our community, inshallah, and that other girls your age, inshallah, share this episode with people. I think they can really benefit from it. And I pray, inshallah, we have more walking in that footsteps that you were walking in. And may Allah lead you and pave that way to you to be the strong Muslim women that He has set, that He wants us to be, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was such a nice discussion.
Alhamdulillah. Honestly, you guys did amazing, mashallah. And to all our viewers at home, Jazakallah khairan for tuning in tonight's episode. We are on the doorstep of the day of Arafah now coming in. So inshallah, I hope everyone has made their long list of du'as and, are preparing for this day. It is the most important day of the entire year. So it's really important that we make the most of it, give your sadaqah. The Qurban has all been sold out with NZF, alhamdulillah, but you can still give your sadaqah and make your list of du'as and make the most of this blessed time. May Allah bless you all. Have a beautiful night. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.